By the way, it didn't happen as bad as they thought. New York City won't be facing another snowmageddon. The worst of the storm has missed Manhattan, but a historic blizzard could still slam other parts of the Northeast.
That's right. Millions of people are hunkered down for the storm, with flights canceled and many folks just staying home. Heather Sells has the story.
The worst storm of 2015 is moving in today, with up to 3 feet expected in some areas.
This is going to be a significant storm.
It should not be taken lightly.
Overnight, however, forecasters rolled back their most dire predictions about the storm in New York City. Instead of 3 feet of snow and hurricane-style winds, they're now talking 2 feet and lesser winds. But the storm is zeroing in on Boston, and many states still have blizzard warnings.
Authorities are taking no chances. They've banned travel on the roads in places like Rhode Island and New York City. The blizzard is expected to rage all Tuesday, with most warnings on through midnight. After that, hundreds of thousands could lose power for days. It's one reason why Operation Blessing has staged a response site in Tuckerton, New Jersey.
We're ready to serve hot meals, we're ready to do food distributions. We're also ready to send volunteer teams out and help vulnerable populations like single moms, elderly, handicapped.
Airline passengers have already felt the brunt of the storm. The airlines have canceled more than 5,000 flights from coast to coast.
They just keep on pushing us around a little bit. I mean, what are you going to do? It's 30 inches of snow.
I'm exhausted and annoyed, and I just want to go home.
It's unlikely that regular airport travel will resume until Wednesday. For now, it's time for millions to wait out the storm and hope for the best. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. I might add that Operation Blessing has got some activity going: hot meals, blankets, shelter, all that's needed for at-risk populations, just like with Hurricane Sandy. We were there on the scene, moved up again into New Jersey to help people, and I don't know, farther north. So if you want to help Operation Blessing, there's a number there on your screen. You can call in 1-800-759-0700. It's Operation Blessing. By the way, I have a piece of what I consider good news. Those of us who are closer to the scene, the former governor of Virginia is a graduate of Regent University and a dear friend of mine, Bob McDonnell, and he was convicted of this Hobbs Act of improper actions while he was governor. Now the case has gone on appeal to the United States Fourth Circuit, which is located in Richmond, and a panel of the Fourth Circuit said there is serious question of law and fact, and therefore Governor McDonnell, or former Governor McDonnell, does not have to go to jail. He can post bond waiting for the appeal, and the Fourth Circuit essentially is saying there's a very good chance that that whole case will be thrown out. There were 5 or 6 former attorneys general, Democrat and Republican, that put in an amicus brief showing why the application of this Hobbs Act was wrong, how it was too vague, how it didn't make constitutional standards, and how that Governor McDonnell did not perform any so-called official act. You know, just the fact that you are nice to somebody and give him lunch in your house doesn't constitute an official act. And it was very well presented, and as I think a former district court federal judge in Massachusetts, who also teaches law at Harvard Law School, weighed in on another amicus brief. So it was very important, and I know those of us who care about justice are very thrilled to see this initial step. And I think if what they're saying is the entire indictment was flawed, then I dare say that our good friend's name sooner or later will be cleared. We're certainly praying to that end. Well, in other news, Iran is working on a new missile. Yes, a missile that could threaten a nuclear attack on the United States. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
That new video obtained by an Israeli news organization provides more evidence about Iran's ambitions to build nuclear weapons and how it puts Israel and other countries, including the U.S., at risk. Chris Mitchell has the latest details from Jerusalem.
The video taken from satellite images by Israel's Aresbi satellite reveals a 27-meter or nearly 90-foot tall missile. This never-before-seen missile and launch site stands outside Tehran and appears capable of sending a rocket into space or launching an ICBM. Some reports indicate the Pentagon estimates it might have been 2 years in development. Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Dory Gold says this latest revelation clearly poses a clear and present danger to America.
Originally, many in the U.S. think of Iran as, well, you know, that's a problem for Saudi Arabia or Israel, but it's not our problem. That's not true. The trend in Iranian planning for long-range missiles that can eventually reach the eastern seaboard of the United States, that's a given now.
Gold says the Iranian nuclear and missile threat prompted Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept U.S. House Speaker John Boehner's invitation to address a joint session of Congress early in March. Despite the potential political fallout, he'll use the platform to warn America and the world about the growing danger. Yet the White House and Congress differ on how to respond to the Iranian threat. The administration wants to negotiate, while congressional leaders from both parties prefer any negotiations to include the threat of sanctions. Senate Democrat Bob Menendez recently made this startling comment.
The more I hear from the administration and its quotes, the more it sounds like talking points that come straight out of Tehran.
Republican Senator Bob Corker told Jerusalem news agencies he can't understand why the president promises to veto upcoming congressional legislation about Iran even before it's been written.
For Congress not to have the ability to weigh in on this, which has such geopolitical importance and a place where Congress has played such an important role, is ridiculous and candidly irresponsible for Congress not to play a role.
Iran, the U.S., and 5 other nations negotiating Iran's nuclear program have set a June 30th deadline for reaching a final settlement. Some leaders on both sides of the Atlantic believe the expanding nuclear and missile program represents Iran's ultimate goals of attacking what it calls the little Satan Israel and the great Satan, the United States. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pat, this will probably do little to change the administration's plans to keep negotiating.
I don't know. They face the world with some kind of purple-colored glasses. I don't understand where they see the world. Iran is a powerful country, and it's on one edge of Saudi Arabia. Now Yemen has fallen to Iranian-backed rebels, Shia rebels, and so you've got Yemen on the other side of Saudi Arabia. Then you've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is Iranian-backed. And you have Syria, which may be a client state now of Iran. And so the whole Middle East is being engulfed with Iranian presence. And one asks himself, what is it that the Iranians need with long-range nuclear weapons? What will they accomplish with a missile that can reach the United States? Since when are we going to attack Iran? But we certainly need to put sanctions on and to cripple their economy until they behave themselves. And they're not behaving themselves as long as they can keep on talking, keep on the centrifuges working to purify and enrich uranium, and building nuclear missile capability. There's something wrong with the way we're looking at this. But in any event, ladies and gentlemen, it's a time for prayer because this is crucial. And again, if you read the Bible, look at Ezekiel 38, and there's a coalition that comes against Israel, and one of the key players is something called Persia. Persia's there, and it's what looks like Turkey and what looks like Russia. They're all in there together against Israel. So keep your eyes open. John.
Pat, Kurdish fighters have pushed ISIS militants out of Syria's key border town of Kobani after a battle there that lasted 4 months. The Kurds celebrated the victory Monday. It was a triumph for both them and the U.S.-led coalition, and a major stinging defeat for ISIS. The Islamic fighters had hoped to capture Kobani, but failed after attacks from the Kurds and withering airstrikes by coalition forces. A senior Kurdish official says ISIS defenses have collapsed and its fighters have fled from the area. European Union leaders are threatening more sanctions on Russia because of what they see as Moscow's growing support for fighters in eastern Ukraine. That move comes after Standard & Poor's downgraded Russia's credit rating to junk level Monday. It's the first time Russia's credit rating has been that low in more than a decade. Russia has been hurt not only by sanctions, but also by the sharp drop in oil prices in recent months. Russia makes most of its money from selling oil. Russia's currency, the ruble, has also plunged in international trading. And Pat, got to make you wonder, how much pressure can Putin take?
Well, I wonder when those oligarchs are going to start saying, look, you're hitting our pocketbook, because that's what's happening. The Russians won't be able to borrow. They can't. They go into the international markets. They're no longer AAA credit. They're now junk grade. And so who's going to buy their bonds? Nobody. And with their currency in a downward spiral, a smart guy would say, okay, I've made a mistake, let's get together and talk. But if Putin is an obsessed ideologue, he may double down and then realize that he's got a nuclear arsenal. He can start making some serious trouble. And that's the thing that we all should be concerned about, that he would be like the wounded bear and start lashing out at others. Let's hope that doesn't happen. John?
Pat, a major asteroid flew by Earth Monday, and as you can see in this photo released by NASA, it even had its own small moon. The asteroid went by Earth at a distance of about 750,000 miles, which is about 3 times the distance of the orbit of the Earth. The asteroid was about 1/3 of a mile wide, and it was the biggest that will pass by Earth for at least another decade, until the year 2027. Although this asteroid posed no threat to the Earth, astronomers are still looking for unknown space rocks that could eventually hit our planet and do extremely serious damage. And Pat, as you're well aware, NASA is currently tracking about 11,000 near-Earth asteroids.
Well, I wrote a book. It's called The End of the Age.
End of the Age.
Did you like it?
And I loved it so much that I gave it to my dad for Christmas.
Yeah.
He couldn't put it down. I just got an email from my brother Truman last night saying he can't put it down. So you must have written a good book.
Well, it's the only attempt I've made at fiction. It was a novel, and yet it was based on the Bible, and it was one of those things where the Holy Spirit just poured out. I mean, later on I was praying, I said, God, what's going to happen? And the Lord spoke to me. He said, I told you what was going to happen, and you wrote it in a book. I said, thank you, Lord.
Well, I read it about 10 years ago, and I want to reread it because I remember having the same reaction. Like it's a page turner, and what my dad told me, and he knows a lot about the Bible. He said he learned so much about end times from reading this novel.
The Lord just showed me how to integrate so many of these scriptures, and there isn't anything that will fulfill the words of Jesus Christ in the Olivet Discourse. And the talk about the end times than an asteroid hitting the Earth. Yeah. Mine was, as I recall, 1 kilometer in diameter, which is like 0.6 of a mile. It wasn't a big thing, but it weighed 3 billion pounds and came hurtling down out of space. And I had all the things happening, but it happened very quickly. It won't take long, and it fulfills perfectly the scriptures having to do with the last days.
Well, I think you can still get End of the Age at Amazon or
they still got it. I don't know.
CBN.com. I know we sell it in our bookstore, but
I don't know if it's still in press.
It's a great read.
Well, thank you very much. I'll give the Lord the credit because I was merely a scribe writing down what he was doing.
Well, it was a God thing for sure.
Amen.
Libyan militants are now claiming responsibility for kidnapping at least 20 Coptic Christians in 2 separate incidents in the last 2 months. 7 of them were abducted from their car in late December while driving from Sirte back to Egypt. At the start of this month, armed men raided a building in Sirte and abducted another 13 Christians from where they lived. Muslims were allowed to go free. Photos of all 20 hostages were posted online back on January 12th. More than 1 million Egyptian workers remain caught in the fighting between warring factions in Libya. Members of a U.S. government panel are offering to take the punishment for a blogger sentenced to 1,000 lashes in Saudi Arabia. Christianity Today reports 7 members of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom signed a letter to the Saudi ambassador. They volunteered to take 100 lashes apiece on behalf of Raif Badawi. Badawi is a Muslim convicted of writing the blog Free Saudi Liberals, which called for open discussion and political and religious topics inside the kingdom. The The letter is signed by Christian, Muslim, and Jewish members of that commission. Remember, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.